And how difficult is it to destroy the chemical weapons that are already out there? Joe Cirincione is the president of Plowshares Fund and the author of the new book, Nuclear Nightmares, Securing the World Before It's Too Late. Sounds appropriate. Joe, thank you. And Frank Gaffney is here, president of the Center for Security Policy and former Assistant Secretary of Defense for International Security Policy as well. Great to have you both. Joe, let me begin with you and with that question. Is it realistic, the goal of rounding up all these chemical weapons and destroying them?
This is actually something we know how to do, although we've never done it in the midst of a civil war. We have international inspection teams that have been working on these kinds of things for 20 years. They've helped eliminate chemical weapons in 15 different countries, inspected 86 countries. We've also have experience with eliminating the chemical weapons in Iraq, eliminating the chemical weapons in Libya. This is a very, very tough job, but we can do it, and it's far easier than the alternatives. U.S. presidents have always wanted to get rid of Assad's chemical weapon stockpile. It's the major threat that Israel faced. President Obama is actually closer to doing this than any previous president.
So, Frank, is this a great opportunity that we need to seize upon?
We'll see. I think it is likely to prove impossible as a practical matter because, as Joe says, we've done this in other countries, but never in the middle of a civil war. We've never dealt it, I think, with a government like Bashar Assad, who is absolutely unreliable and will almost certainly do everything he can to take advantage of the opportunities that have been presented so far to squirrel these weapons away. And more to the point, I think the idea that we're somehow going to help the Russians do this when they are also so unreliable is such to make this really a non-starter as a practical matter. It will buy time for Bashar Assad. It will further slow whatever lingering momentum there was for a military action. And by the way, I'm not keen on a military action by us at this point. But it also, I think, is going to demonstrate to a lot of people, including people who are hostile to this country, and maybe even some that haven't been, like Egypt, that Russia is a reliable ally and we're not.
It's an interesting point, Joe. Russia is not exactly the role model of disarmament around the world. Should we trust the Russians when it comes to chemical weapons inside Syria?
It's really not a question of trusting them. It's a question of what you can get, what you can verifiably get. You know, if you only negotiate with your Facebook friends, you're not going to get much done. This is who we negotiate with. We deal with our adversaries. We deal with our enemies. Eisenhower negotiated with Stalin. Nixon made friends with Mao. You deal with people you don't like that you have your adversaries with, but you do it for the national security interest of the United States. Clearly, Russia and Assad are trying to buy time. They're trying to preserve the Assad regime. That's what they hope they'll get out of it. What we want to get out of it is those chemical weapons, weapons that could kill millions of people in the region. If we can even secure them in depots, have international inspectors there, which we could do within months, you have effectively taken them away from Assad. You've prevented him from using him. Will he try to cheat? Of course he will. And then you try to catch him, then you try to reduce it. But by getting most of the weapons, you've greatly reduced the risk.
A lot of time, a lot of money, and then the big question is about the precedent that it sets, Frank. Is this the type of pattern that we want to set for others like Iran?
Well, it's not just the precedent, it's the practicality of it. Joe has used the critical word, if. If you can get Bashar Assad to stockpile all of his weapons under international control, that would mean that presumably they would be less dangerous to a lot of people, assuming, of course, they're not overrun by the rebels, which predominantly turned out to be Muslim Brotherhood and al-Qaeda operatives. That's a very big problem as well, coming in the middle of a war that we're trying to help Bashar Assad's opponents win, incredibly enough, including al-Qaeda. But here's the larger point, and I think you've put your finger on it. Do you honestly believe that the Iranians or the North Koreans or anybody else who is currently trying to figure out how to preserve their regimes and expand their power is going to be other than emboldened by what they see going on here? I'm afraid that this is a non-starter as a practical matter, and it will, in fact, embolden our enemies. It will, in fact, undermine our friends. And it will, in fact, undermine and diminish our country as
We're
well.
dealing with a lot of hypothetics, and you bring up some really important points. So I'd like to have you both back as we get some more specifics on what actually a deal would look like, because right now we have no idea, quite frankly. It's just the premise of one. So
Right.
Joe, Frank, I'd love you both to come back. We could talk about more about the practicality and also maybe some of the philosophy behind the policy. Nice to have you both. Thank you.